just like these are the Americans said we blew it up. They said no, we shut them down. The American planes or however.
Shit lover.
Incense cloud and spiral, clock forgets to count. I breathe in, all the questions fade. Little lantern in my ribcage from the inside out. Lotus in the fever, open and slow in the noise. Every color humming into wisdom, into joy. I'm witness in the center, where the chaos turns to gold. Lotus in the fever, light of ancient and laughing gods in the grain of gold constellations on an old desk. Every doubt, just a passing cloud. I can't feel my bones remember I was never less than blessed. Lotus in the feedback, open soul in the new. Every color humming into wisdom, into joy. I'm witnessing the season where the chaos turns to gold. Lotus in the feedback, like nature I'm born. Strength in the soul.
Kick those man!
Bow to the moon, then I'm old. Alistair. Oh, I was going to make a joke about Crowley's, but apparently you're under. Okay. All right, let's hear about it.
Hello.
Oh, you're going to do an accent too, huh?
Did you not want to give Usman any money?
Sorry, I can't understand. Try speaking English.
Did you not want to give Usman any money?
I didn't want to waste his time or mine talking. I don't know what he wanted.
You know, on average, the average human has 2.5 billion seconds to spend before they die.
Yeah, you're wasting a few of them here.
Well, I was listening to Alan Watts.
That's a good start. That would have been a much better start.
Yeah, I was listening to him today. It was like a 4-hour lecture. The end of it, he does like a guided meditation, and that was really interesting.
That's interesting. I can't recall ever hearing him do anything like that. I've heard, apparently, I probably have heard it. I just don't recall that. That's interesting.
Yeah. He says during the meditation, he says, "There's no rush. There's no rush." So like he's reminding you that you're connected to this eternal. I don't know. It's just so amazing. He's just so special.
Well, he's the guy for me. He's the guy who woke me up. I mean, that's it. He was the beginning of my life.
Yeah, the lecture was 4 hours that I listened to. I listened to it twice. I listened to it all day. It's
Yeah.
labeled on YouTube as like never before heard, but
I haven't heard
before.
that. What's it called? Yeah, I might listen. What is it? Can you give me a link to it?
Yeah, let me find it.
Yeah, give me a link to it. I'd love, because I've heard damn near. Well, I'm pretty sure I've heard everything he's ever said, but this is new. So
it's the same old Alan. It's every time you hear him. I'm not sure. Probably I don't know.
I mean, it makes a big difference whether it was the early '60s or late '60s or the.
I'm gonna go with late '60s.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway, give me a link when you find it. You don't need to get it to me now, but I'm curious. Yeah, I'd love it if I haven't heard it before. If there's something I have not heard before, that would be a real joy.
Let's see here. It's not copper as far as I know. Yeah, okay, I got it. How do you want me to send it to you? I can't.
If you're on Facebook, that would be the best way. You can give it to me here, and I'll just make sure I copy it. I'll never find it again here, so.
I'm not on.
Just get it to me anyway. I'll take care of it.
Let's see if I can find you. What's your Facebook name? Aaron?
Aaron Stone. There are a couple people, imitating me, but I'm the only one that uses this same icon.
I sent it to you on Facebook.
Oh,
check.
Great.
It's 4 hours. I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. It was top notch. Top notch Alan. It was so amazing because he's fucking smart. He's not, I don't even think he's reading. He must have a syllabus, He's got a syllabus, but he knows ancient Greek. He knows ancient Latin. He knows Chinese. I mean, and
he's a real special guy. You don't have to convince me.
Well,
Alan Watts is the most important person in the universe.
So, yeah, in this lecture, he's also talking about phones in the future. It's so fucking amazing.
All right.
Enjoy it.
Oh, thank you. I will.
I can't send it to you on Clubhouse, though, because it's on a different
I've
phone.
already got it here, so no problem.
Okay, well, then I am wishing you a happy good evening and a happy week, good sir.
Well, listen, I just figured out who you are.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, I've pretty much written you off. You did good today.
He's written me off. All right, well, have a good night. Take care.
Yeah, thank you, man. Bye.
He's written me off. I can't believe that old dirty bastard wrote me off. I've written you off at this point. You didn't know who I was.
Soft inhale, count it in your chest. Let the shoulders fall, this alien where the tension hides. Send your breath.
Have you seen her? Have you seen her butt cheeks? Fat suck video. Have you seen her butt cheeks on her Facebook? Oh my God, he is risen.
Focus like a flame, still all the sound, and like water, you will not break now. One thought in, one thought out, nothing extra, nothing loud, just this moment, just this round of easy breathing, easy now. Bend like water, follow gravity down, slowly breathing, roots you to the ground. Focus like a flame, still in all the sound. Bend like water, you are steady now. Soft inhale, count it in your chest. Let the shoulders fall, nothing to impress. Eyes on a point, steady as a stone. Thoughts can pass, you let them go. Bend like water, follow gravity down. Slowly breathing, roots you to the ground. Focus like a flame, still in all this sound. Burn like water, you break now. Notice every inch where the tension hides. Send your breath there, feel it loosen. Slide. Neck like a reed, sway.
Now, if everybody's comfortable,
My
we can get started.
I've announced the seminar is to be about the cosmic network. And therefore, we've got to spend the first evening understanding something about the nature of networks. Because it was after him. You can all agree among yourselves as to what the rules are. I'm going to tell you
Honey,
what these brothers
I'm from your anus.
We're going to say this is the law, see? And you got to obey.
Hello?
So, it's how we have got historically the idea of there being a law of nature.
What?
That somebody told nature what to do.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
A wonderful poem by Father Feeney
Hello?
about bees. God, to some sticky stuff, not yet alive in a hive.
Hello?
Come, hum, be my bee and buzz as I bid. And sure enough, it was, and it did.
Hello?
See, and in the beginning, let there be light.
好辛苦呀，都快点临盆了。
黄金动作。
So commandment is the founder. So the quest of the law of nature
Chinese
is the
to
quest
die.
for the true understanding of the word of God. For by the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the hosts of them by the breath of his mouth. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. What is that word? If we could find out the word of God, here's the idea, you see, we could perform incredible magic. That's why, for example, the name God in the Bible is not to be uttered except once by the high priest in the Holy of Holies, once a year. Otherwise, that name, Yod-Heh in Hebrew, we don't really know how it was pronounced. And Jehovah mixes up those consonants with the vowels of Adonai. And then it's all mixed up in translation. But anyway, Jehovah is a polite way of saying what can't be said. Because if you know the word, if you know the name of God, you have power. You have the power of God. And so all ancient ideas of magic are knowing the names of God. It is said that there are 100 names, and 99 are revealed to us. And the camel knows the 100th name, which is why he looks so snooty. But so also, a person in we now call primitive orders of society are loath to reveal their names. Because if I know your true name, I can utter it a power over you. Now, you say, well, that seems a very naive idea, but it is exactly through the knowledge of names that we have Western science. And that is magic. That is through trying to understand the laws of nature. So that if you could understand the word, underneath all the phenomena, you could change the phenomena and create magic. Only this, that many scientists have got rather sophisticated and have realized the word comes later than the event. That in the beginning wasn't the word. Of course, if you want to make new sense out of the phrase in the beginning was the word, you have to go to Hinduism, where they have the idea that VAC in Sanskrit, or speech, is the basis of creation. But by this, they fundamentally mean vibration. As sound, you see, is... They say that is, you see, if you listen to sound and go right down into it, fundamentally get what sound is all about, you understand the mystery of things. Because the whole mystery of things is vibrating energy. On and off. Simple as that. Life is off. Have on, have on, have off. It's quite a relief. But there they say that's the beginning. Now, they also say, in another sense, on another level, that the roots of Sanskrit, say the root form, say the word Buddha comes from, which means to know or to be awake. Bhava, which means becoming, comes from the root, which means to grow. So on. Karma, doing, comes from the root kri, to act. So they say, though, that the roots of Sanskrit are not simply the roots of a language, they're the roots of life. Because in another sense, altogether, you see, you create the... And this is something that we're not very conscious of. It's the way you think that determines your basic reactions to what happens. In the words of Shakespeare, there is nothing either good or ill, but thinking makes it so. Thinking is talking inside your head. And we, through this, build up all sorts of weird notions. We say, for example, well, one day you'll have to die. Have to? What's the emotional content of saying you'll have to die? Something imposed upon you against your will. Passive mode, have to. You're compelled to die. But I can't be compelled to die unless I'm fighting it. Supposing I want to die, supposing I commit suicide. Well, supposing we look at it all in another way and say, when I get a disease and die as a result of it, getting a disease, I do. Just as much as taking a walk. Only we've got our thoughts around. We say, you ought not to get a disease. Even if it's just somehow you ought not to do that. You ought to go on. You can't say, when death comes about, I laid me down with a will. Because we've got this life being divided into two parts. Things that we do on it, and things that happen to us on the other. And Buddhists say, what happens to you is your karma. And people don't readily understand that. They think my karma, something awful happened to me because of something bad I did in my last life. And therefore, I've got bad karma. Karma simply means your doing, your action. So that when something that happens to me is called my karma, it means that it's your own doing. And if you recognize that it's your own doing, it's never bad karma. It's only bad karma. Refuse to admit that it's your own doing and merely blame someone or something else that it's something that happened to you. Now, I've digressed a little because what I was getting at was the meaning of a law of nature. Laws of nature were taken over. The idea of the law of nature was taken over Western science from this ancient magical notion. The commandment of God being the foundation for everything that happens in the world. But now, today, in 20th century science, there is a new idea. The laws of nature are not things that exist in any real sense, which the motion of stars or the behavior of animals and rocks, phenomena which these things obey. The universe doing its stuff. But because we have a certain kind of structure and brain, we want to make sense of it. And therefore, we find various ways of understanding the world by the principle of regularity. Now, what's that? Let's take a clock. A clock ticks regularly. But the world does not tick regularly. Inconveniently enough, the sun does not have the Earth go round it in a neat 360 days. Calendar makers. How to rational calendar? There is no solution, because the rotations of the Earth upon its own axis do not neatly synchronize with its rotation around the sun. There's always something a little odd about it. So what we do is we superimpose over this rather odd elliptical path the ideal figure of a circle with its 360 degrees. Now that is also like putting the ruler and saying this piece of wood can be cut to 12 inches. Now there are no inches in the wood. Inches are a method, a technique that human beings have invented for measuring things. And so we can cut out of a cloth or a so many feet. Well, originally it's simply sharing the trunk with us by putting our feet over it one after, saying it's so many feet long, or so many spans when you stretch out the hand. This is a fundamental idea of measurement, which is, of course, one joint. Not your kind of joint. And so this comparison of man's body and its regular shape, you see, 10 fingers on either side, 5 fingers on either side makes 10, 5 toes on either side makes 10. And so by stretching ourselves out, as it were, against nature, we measured it. And the idea of this of measurement is the same idea as the idea of the law of nature. A law of nature is exactly the same kind of, or a hammer, or a saw. It is a way of thinking which enables us to control our environment by observing relatives and then by making calculus, which is a process really of betting. Will it be regular next time? And the odds are that it may be. If it's done it once this way, it's likely to do it again that way. So in this way, you predict eclipses of the sun. You predict the phases of the moon. You measure, you count it, how it went, how often it did it like this, how often it did it like that. And you say, well, it keeps on doing it. And you think, well, it's fascinating. It seems to obey me. Tell you any time it's going to come up. And if the other people around haven't figured it out, they think because I'm going to say to them, the moon is going to change at such and such a time. So many days from now, it's going to have a different shape. They'll say, my God, he was right. And they'll think, I'm making it happen. Because I can do that. And so I get a rather privileged position. Because I agree. But that's the basic idea, you see, of the law of nature. The law of nature is a human network, like the lines of celestial latitude and longitude. They don't exist in the heavens, but we project them on the sky in order to measure the positions of the stars, because the stars are scattered in a very confusing way. And just that mess and figure it out. Though the clever ones, you see, just said, look at it through a network, a spherical network. You can number all the squares in the spherical network in a circle for 360 degrees. You've thrown the network on the sky. It's really there, see? Then to help you a little further, pick out some of the big stars and see if they make a shape. You know, this is like doing a Rorschach test. And you see, oh, look, there's one over there that looks like a dipper. Or some people call it a plow. And it looks like a cross. And there's one there, by some extreme way, can be made to look like a virgin. And all these lines that are join nations together are our ways of upon this great and glorious confusion so that we can read it and chart it. But obviously, you could very well see that if you looked at this same pattern of stars from some completely different position in space, all those constellations and their arrangements would vanish. And you'd have to invent a new one. Because there is nowhere where the stars really are. It depends where you're looking from. So then, man in nature, with his extraordinary symmetry and its amazing complications, figures it out. And it's man who introduces the law into the world. He invents it. But in a way, invenire, to invent, is to discover. But what we discover, in a way, is not something that's out there. When we invent the law, we are discovering something about us. Our own passion for prediction, for regularity, for keeping things under control. Therefore, there has to be a law. So then, going back right now to the beginning of what I started to say. The question was then, what is the law between the atoms? Between the fundamentals composed? Well, and there's a cue, and it hits that ball, and then it moves over, and it hits that one, and that hits that one. And so the final ball, which moves into the pocket, has its behavior explained through its contact with the other billiard balls and the final contact with the cue. That's why it did it. And so the view of the world as something that happens by the mechanical processes of the law of cause and effect is one that is really basic to most people's common sense today, to most educated people. They would say it's very difficult to figure it all out because the whole thing is so complicated, but if you could know all the details involved in, say, the behavior or a single act of a human being, you would find the deductible result of a series of bouncing balls against each other, the mental patterns that predisposed the great final event to be just like that. So that theory of relationship between the atoms is called in technical language catenary. C-A-T-E-N-A-R-Y, catenary. A catenary effect, or a relationship between, to use another illustration, where you stand a row of bricks end up, and you knock over the first one and they all go kata, 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 and fall down. That is a catenary sequence. But it becomes increasingly obvious today to the physicist and to the biologist that that will not do as a sufficient description of how various events affect each other. And so there's another type of causal relationship altogether, which is called, instead of catenary, reticulate. R-E-T-I-C-U-L-A-T-E, reticulate, from the Latin rete, meaning a net relationship. Wherein, in other words, any given event is not simply ascribed to one or more previous events, but that the relationship between the past and the present, and between the present and the future, is all to be taken into consideration in understanding any one event. In other words, let's take one event. I drop a ball and it bounces. Let's say it's an event. I don't know how many events it really is, but we'll just say, for the sake of argument, that it's an event. Now, is it enough in describing this event to say, I let all go It obeyed the law of gravity and hit the floor, but because it was made of rubber and had some air inside it, it bounced and sort of slightly distorted because it had an energy in it. Because ball dropped, that I let it go, that it bounced, depended not merely upon a historical sequence of events that you could lay out in a string along a line of time. It depends also on a present context. There must be a certain density. All kinds of things have to coexist with this in order for me to be up the ball at all, much less manufacture a ball. So that what happens must be considered not merely as a historical phenomenon, but it must be seen in context. Context is terribly important because it isn't just when a thing that is important, it's where it happens. In what setting? So that you could say that my blood, my veins, is in a certain setting. In a test tube, it's in a completely different setting. And in a test tube, my blood is not in the way it behaves in my veins. Therefore, it's not the same thing. So, an individual person, one setting will behave in one way, in another setting in a completely different way. I remember when I was a child. I was one boy when I was at home with my parents. When I went to visit my uncle and aunt, I was different. When I was with my peers, I was someone quite different. Because I changed according to the setting, and children are very well aware of this. It's only as we go on that we keep having it drummed into our heads that we ought to have a character, because we're influenced by novels, where the characters are supposed to be consistent. And so you're a consistent character. You ought to behave the same in all circumstances and towards all people. That merely means you become inflexible. Therefore, depend on the context in which they are found, upon their network relationship to everything else that's going on. And one of the reasons for this, which is going to lead us to something more profound but much simpler, is, of course, that the whole notion causal relationships between different things and different events is a purely abstract idea that does not really fit at all. In nature, in this physical world that you feel when you hold your head, or hold somebody's hand, or just breathe, in that world, separate events. None whatever. Sure, there are all sorts of wiggles around here, all sorts of lines, all sorts of colors, all sorts of surfaces, all sorts of forms, but they're not separate. Because you see, you can't separate an inside, what you are inside your skin, from outside of the skin. Because you can see that at once. If there weren't anything outside your skin, there'd be no... It takes the outside and the inside working together to create this situation. And in the simplest way, the situation that I call my body wouldn't be operating unless there was air around here to breathe. This physical phenomenon goes with the situation being air. Now, true, it wiggles about inside the air in a rather complicated way. And other people watching say, oh, something going on over there. Because the air you can't see and it remains constant except when there's a gale. And so you don't pay much attention to it because it's always around. What you pay attention to is what changes rather rapidly. And you say, that's a that. Say, hey, you say to someone, you see this change going on, something wiggling over there, say, what's that? See? And he knows what you mean by that. As that means something on the end of the finger point. It's different. It's peculiar. See? And that's a that. So from that comes the idea of an event or a thing, a that. But all these that's that are happening aren't disconnected. Go with each other just as I with the surrounding air. And just as this whole situation in which we are at this moment is a complicated going withness. Now here they get to the fundamental idea, this idea of going with. And from this we shall be able to notion of net are very difficult for people brought up to use Western languages to understand. Now, going withness, we could call activity, relationship, means simply, let me first of all put it in a very extreme form. Yourself, sitting here at this moment, being just exactly the sort of person you are. Maybe a little neurotic, maybe a little sick physically, ashamed of for some reason or other, or whatever. You know? Just the way you are, anyway, just like that, sitting here. That situation goes with, as back goes with front, the entire situation of the rest of the universe. Now, you, as you are, exactly the way you are, and you really don't know what that is. You may have some opinions about it, but you really don't know. That goes with the way the whole of the boundless being is arranged. Now, it isn't that the way the rest of boundless being is arranged is determining you to be the way you are. Or is that? If that's true, if it determines you, then we must also allow the other side of the picture that you determine it. It's your karma. You did it. Which say, no, but I didn't. I couldn't help it. It did me. And you can say, tisn't, like two children arguing until you realize that the argument was stupid. Because you and it are one event. It isn't a question of it controlling you. It's all, as Taylor the whole universe is the only true atom. The only truly indivisible whole. The human being, though, finds this difficult to understand because we're all. Now you should be different. You ought to change. You ought to be different. Now listen, you're sick, and I got a system. See, I got a system. I got a real school here, a thing that is very important, and you should come and study with that. It may not be mine, but it may be some big sage or pundit. And you should come on and study that. And I've thought about this for a long time, because I've heard every kind of opinion of all the sorts of things that I should do in order to get myself into shape. And I realized that if I followed this advice, I would spend my entire day doing exercise in preparation for my half an hour's yoga practice, 1 hour of zazen, physical exercises, and then a school of thought. No, that's the thing. You're getting confused. Just do one thing. But then I say, now, how am I going to choose which one I'm going to do? Well, he says, this one's the best. And before you know where you are, you're sewed up by some religious fanatic. Now, please, I don't want to do this to you. Please don't think that I have any such recipe that I'm going to give you anything to do for 5 minutes every morning. I just am not. I want to, my whole notion would be to set you all free so that you'd only have to attend one seminar, never have to come back. That's That's the idea, really. Because I know that so far as my own livelihood is concerned, that there are always more people. No, I don't collect the following. There are plenty more people to fill vacuum. But this is the whole idea that we're going to work on of a net. That you, a dewdrop, on a multidimensional spider's web early in the morning. And if you look at that thing carefully, you will see that in every dewdrop are the reflections of all the other dewdrops. So the way that dewdrop looks goes with the way all the other ones look. See? The particular glimmer in it and so on. Its peculiar position, and everybody has to have a peculiar position in the cosmos. The reflections in every one of them are different, according to the position they're in and the other dewdrops that they reflect at such and such angles. But nevertheless, the whole network, all the dewdrops, depend on each individual dewdrop. And each individual dewdrop mutually depends on all the others. Now that's the sort of a scheme we're living in. And it a little bit affronts our logic at first, because we say, I can understand that I depend on this universe, because after all I need sunlight and air and water and the help of the society and all that kind of father and mother. But looking at it from the other, depends on me. That's because we've been brought up with the put-down theory of the individual. Little children should be seen and not heard. You are the servant and subject of God, and don't you ask impertinent questions. Or another way of putting us down is to say, well, you're just a piece of a fluke in a mindless... We always managed not to find out that the relationship of the network is mutual. It runs both ways. That it depends on you just as much as you depend on it. Because you see, it's you, with your ingenious brain, that, for example, turns vibrations of air into sound. You turn whatever the sun is doing into light. You turn whatever the air is doing into a sky called blue. There is only blue for a brain. It's just like if you hit a drum and it's got no skin, it won't make any noise. So it's the tight skin that evokes the noise of a moving fist. So you, as the reflector, like the dewdrop reflects, you, as the so-called reflector of all that goes on, by the constitution of what kind of a reflector you are, you evoke what we call sun, moon, and stars. The faces, they're only vast in relation to you. They're not really vast. Only if you compare them with yourself, they're vast. They could be considered very tiny. Or equally, the space between two sides of a hair could be considered vast. If you want to think about it, if you really want to go into it, an awful lot between one diameter of a hair, you know. And if you think about it a long time, you'll think it's what we call a vast subject. Study it, from microscopy. It is a vast subject. Depends on the attitude, you see. But the basic principle, the thing I really want to try and get across, is this idea of going with the universe around you is inside. You go with it in the same way that the stalk goes with the root, flower, and as front back, as North Pole of magnet goes with South Pole. This principle of relationship governs everything. I wouldn't say governs. We're using these wretched terms that we have to use out of our language. It underlies everything. And it's important to realize, and let me repeat this, that the great universe does not individual any more than the small individual actually controls the great universe. This is not a question of controlling. It is a question of more like dancing, of what happens, rather than what makes it happen. Things aren't made to happen. Only if you insist that a certain event is quite separate, then you can think of it being made to happen by the events that came before it. But if you realize they're all parts of one event, different aspects, different phases of one event, then you see it happening and you don't see anything making it happen. Forcing that whole thing's being made to happen, in other words, goes back to the idea of a universe that is based on a monarchical image, where the boss says, you do that, and the thing can't help it, and so it becomes something in a network. Now, you will very well understand that when you see the knots in a network, squares of the net, they're all held together. Imagine the kind of network where they're being, something like knitting. They're all held together by each other. And if something breaks at one point, the thing starts raveling. So the reticulate view, or the net view of the universe, is one in which the Buddhists say everything mutually interpenetrates everything else. So, as I was trying to make the central point, the point of implication, the point of relativity, that things go together like two sticks standing on the ground in this way. See? They give each other mutual support. Or like the three rings in the Valentine beer trademark, or the Christian symbol of locking is broken down for all of them. So, in the same way, the individual, although seeming to be something that rattles around in the universe, although a given planet or a given star seems to be something that is moving on its own, for motion, the behavior of stars is a situation that arises only because of the mutual interdependence of all stars. Because, to take a very simple situation, if there is only one star in the whole universe, no motion can be ascribed to it. It can't even be said to be still. Nobody knows what it's doing, because there's nothing for it to relate to. But take two stars, and they can get nearer to each other or further away from each other. But no one knows which is moving. Get three stars, and then you have, say, two close together, and one of them seems to go away. Now, who is moving away from who? Are the two stars saying, hey, we don't like you, we're going to get out of your way? Or are they saying to the other star, why don't you like us? Why do you keep going away? Well, who's right? Well, you can say on the principle of democracy that the majority right. But then they say, well, let's have an umpire, and we have a fourth star who can stand above us. You see, two stars can only move in a straight line with respect to each other. Three stars can move in a plane with respect to each other, but a fourth star can establish a third dimension, where we can say, I can look down on you and take an object point. But then the argument is which one of them is the fourth. But that's the basic principle on which the whole universe is constructed, in which motion depends on comparison with something relatively still. And there can't be any motion at all. There's that going on. That you imply it altogether would exist. He would come to the conclusion that that human body was something from a behavior implied. This whole thing. Just as with a laser beam system, you can photograph context of crystalline intentions that belong to. But you're moving with just the same harmonious way. You notice the waves moving and the tree clouds moving. And as you don't accuse the clouds of making aesthetic mistakes, so really there's a certain light in which you can see human beings, both good and bad, perfect forms of nature. Who's about who? They are all legitimate, but a skillful person lives on two levels at once, are able to comprehend in that more restricted view, whereby things are good and bad. Just take the commons room in this area, it's pretty clear there's a difference between the up direction and the down direction. But we know this area is situated in interstellar space, and there is no up and no down. Now the second situation, have only the discriminatory point of view. If you take your fundamental stand as a being on the difference between good and evil, you get in the Christian hang-up. You have then to say that there is eternal heaven and eternal hell, that the distinction between good and evil is radical. And if you do that, you begin to suffer from a disease called chronic guilt, which is one of the most destructive emotions that anybody can have. You feel an outcast from the universe, at odds with reality itself, at odds with God. And that sends people quite mad, and is responsible for a good deal of the craziness of Western civilization. It's making too much of a good thing out of the distinction between good and evil. It is an important distinction, but it's not fundamentally important. And you have to learn to admit different degrees of importance. And just say that because you can't just say that because a certain distinction isn't absolute, that it's not important. After all, your own physical formation is not absolute. It's important. So, the situation of man in this network is to repeat the proposition. On the one hand, that he as an organism, psychophysical organism, is something that the whole cosmos is doing. That was as much of truth, I think, as there is in astrology, which I regard as a pseudo-science. But it is based on a very fundamental principle. And when you draw a map of a person's soul, you draw the truth. So you have difficulty because we have all been brainwashed by several centuries of put that you made a wretched little subject mechanism of incredible vastness. Having entertained those two theories of man, of existence, for so many centuries, we are very much brainwashed into being unable to see us mutually causative, or to use the Chinese expression, mutually arising. Now then, a second difficulty arises in this, which requires that I bring in some ideas, first of all, from Buckminster Fuller. The principal notion of Buckminster Fuller's thought, and if you don't know this name, Buckminster Fuller is what I would call a philosophical engineer, a man who is one of the most creative minds in the modern world. He invented the geodesic dome, which is his main claim to economic fame. But beyond that, he's done a great deal of extremely fascinating thinking about the future of technology and the situation of man in the universe. And he has devised this important term, synergy, coming from the Greek, syn, with, ergos, work. But what he means by synergy is this. every complex organism has as a whole an intelligence greater than any one of its parts. This is a difficult idea to swallow because he applies it to technology in this way. He is saying that the industrial natural complex in which we live is something that is going in a certain direction on its own, whether you like it or not. And that way, the nuclear increasing of itself, say outlaw such lunacy as war, will make us feel, I suppose, rather as our individual selves feel inside our... The transportation communications network, prostituting. I hope you all come out, Jesuit theologian, who wrote the best of his biosphere. That is the sphere of living organisms. The biosphere, in turn, generates the noosphere, which is the communication network that we call the mind. Through literature, it's slowly realized. So, Buckminster Fuller is really talking about the same thing. The noosphere is the network of communication. Example, let's just take air transportation. As a result of jet planes, all centers that are in communication with each other by jet aircraft are becoming increasingly the same place. When you wake up in Tokyo, having come from Los Angeles or San Francisco, you are slightly in doubt as to where you are, because Tokyo is an immense muddle. It's a mixture with Los Angeles, of San Francisco with Shanghai, of London, vaguely thrown in, and sort of a touch of Japan. It's a phenomenal place. But if you live in Francisco, you realize it's becoming more like Tokyo, because we have a tremendous inrush of Japanese culture. We have superb Japanese restaurants. You can go to sushi bars, that is to say bars for rice balls and raw fish, which are beautifully served, just like in a bar in Tokyo. And increasingly, we have supermarkets which sell Oriental, African, and Japanese goods. And I call them supermarkets for the unusual. And more people are laying down tatami mats and cooking over hibachis and using chopsticks and every kind of thing like that. So the point is that how near a place is to you is simply a factor of transportation. There are places in the United States. I was just in one in a far out Indian area of South Dakota. It takes longer to reach than to get to Tokyo. So it's further away. That's all there is to it, for all practical purposes. So Fuller's idea is that by the year 1968, so soon, we have a one-town world. And it's coming fast. And as human beings have some problem adapting to this, because as you know, when you travel by jet, just as when you're in an elevator that drops too fast, you feel it left your stomach on the 14th floor and has taken the rest of you down to the first. So the jet aircraft leaves your psyche in London and brings your body to San Francisco. And it takes some time to catch up. All your time rhythms are thrown off. But we'll get used to it. And eventually, therefore, we must add to this, planes are very expensive. All governments have immense investments in aircraft. And to work, they must be kept flying. Otherwise, they get out of order. So they must be kept moving. That means there's also a huge tourist business, constantly shuffling people all around the earth. And as a result of that, it's going to be increasingly a vested interest. And politicians will find it harder and harder to stop it in the interest of having a war. So what we are in effect reduced to at the moment, so far as wars are concerned, are experimental wars. Wars under in small areas against people who allegedly don't matter very much in order to test out our military materials and techniques. Because nobody can afford to keep a large standing army in which there are no veterans. So they must have practice. But increasingly, you see, they find that these practice wars rouse passions and disturb everybody in all directions because there is no such thing as an unimportant people. And so they become increasingly difficult to carry because he feels that the will overcome the folly of individuals or of parts who are unable to act with full understanding of what's going on. And you see, this is a serious problem so far as the individual is concerned. The concentration of information about everything is so great that no individual can possibly grasp it.
By the force of the flash.
Not only has he difficulty in grasping it, but there is difficulty even for big committees to organize this information, to integrate it in such a way that if I need to know a certain thing, I can very swiftly find it out. For an individual untrained in physics, it's very difficult to find out a matter of scanning. And it takes in the totality of events if you want to remember it consciously. So you certainly don't arrange the brain by conscious decision. That's something that you grow. Or we could put it this way, that the intelligence of us grows as it grows you. But here again is another hurdle for the average Westerner whose common sense are thinking that the organization of the universe is intelligent. That seems to us to echo of theism, of ideas where God is based on an anthropomorphic or man-like image, the old gentleman with whiskers in the sky. And of course that God is dead, beyond recall. But that's not the only kind of God. To think of the universe itself, its vast and complex organization, as being intelligent, what on earth does that mean? What do you mean by the word intelligent? Well, when you come to think of it, it's the most difficult word to define. Everybody knows what it is, but very few can say. It's like you know what love is, but just try and define it. You know what time is, but try and define that. Space. Everybody knows what space is, but it's the most difficult thing to pin down. And that's equally true of intelligence. We can see certain complexity as what we call an orderly arrangement of different clusters of complexity. But again, we're using words, all of which are imprecise. What do you mean orderly? That's practically to say it's all in order. It was almost like saying it's intelligently arranged. We recognize these things, but we're not quite sure what we mean by them. But we recognize them at once. And for example, if we begin with the pure hypothesis that we ourselves are intelligent, and let it go at that. If we're not, then nothing is. But let's, for the sake of argument, say that we human beings are intelligent. Now, if that is so, because we are symptoms of that end, and I don't for the life of me see how you could have intelligent symptoms of an unintelligent organization. like branches express the tree, or fruit express the tree. In an unintelligent environment, that is to say, the environment in which you live will be a system of mutual cooperation, and the total balance of that makes your life possible. In other words, human life goes with. If you were to, in other words, human life goes with, as front goes with back, an extremely complex bacteriological world. Which sometimes diseases us, but most of the time assists us by its colonies, its societies, its methods of reproduction. All these complex interrelations are and intestines and all that kind of thing. That's only the bacteriological world. In addition to that, there's a world of insects, which is tremendously
saying something stupid like I love. Saying something stupid like I love. And then I go.
That's not appropriate. We're not talking about mob actions. I didn't say that. Okay, what I'm. Hold on a second. Okay, respectfully. These large gatherings. These large gatherings, just hold on a second, y'all. I promise you, I got time to talk. It's important that
This item is called
versus crew.
All these complex interrelations are the which, without which not, the sine qua non of there being blood and veins and bones and intestines and all that kind of thing. That's only the bacteriological world. In addition to that, there's a world of insects. It's tremendously important to us. But the insects are extremely clever. And if you talk to a good entomologist, he will scare the wits out of you. Because of the most conclusive reasons why insects should ultimately take the whole planet over. We are not absolutely affected by flies because we have lots of spiders. And we have birds. And so birds and insects are mutually necessary to each other. And especially flowers and insects have an arrangement with each other whereby one could say of flowers and bees that although they look very different, they are one and the same order. Flowers, perfume, can't have the bees without the flowers.
This massive capstone weighing 50.
Ladies and gentlemen of the council, gentlemen of the council. Full audit and
Hi guys.
What are you doing, man? What the fuck up, nigga? Some fucking work stuff. What are you doing, man? What the fuck up, nigga? Some fucking works in the building.
That's not appropriate mob action.
just leaving the Kanye show. Tell me about it.
Big, yeah, you know what I'm saying? They can't hold a real one down. It don't matter about all the the shit he pop for real.
This massive capsule weighing 15 tons.
For a joke. He was a clown. He doesn't care about winning the election.
Ross is not interviewing niggas and he's not looking at drama. But if you can go find every big name nigga from whatever city and pin multiple bodies on them, bro, he pinned 9, 10 bodies on Vaughn, 10, 15 on this nigga. He just did another joint before. He's next level. I'm not gonna lie to a nigga like that type of shit right there. That's the shit that differs. I ain't gonna lie, bro. When you be in the hoods and you bring up no jumper and all that, like, niggas ain't niggas trying to come up there, but niggas ain't want that shit. But then when you show a nigga the trap LaRock, nigga like, wait, hold on, what the fuck? Wait, who is this nigga? Niggas like, oh, nah, cuz out of pocket. What cuz doing? Like, nah, tell cuz you gotta take that down. Like, versus a nigga just, you feel me, we watching clips on, like, huh? Like, you're accurate as fuck. I mean, but that's what I'm saying. But that's my point. Whether it's accurate or whether it's not, that's out of pocket.
Yeah, that's out of pocket to us. Because in the culture, we invested in the culture. This is where we come from. He's intrigued by the culture. So he's immersed himself in the culture, but he's not from it. So you don't got the eyes like the shit, the morally that a nigga won't do. And
Eastern you take off, and it's not religious. It's for some other reason. What would the reason be? I ask you again. What would their motivation be?
There's 5 bank holidays in the UK where we do work on Mondays, and these are not religious-based holidays.
Easter's are not religious-based holidays?
I'm telling you that the bank holiday was structured and created not around these celebrations, but just simply because the banks have said that they do not want to function on certain said given days.
Yeah.
Right?
Like Easter, for example.
Well, but if you can let me finish, it might help you actually decide what they're trying to say.
Well, what would the motivation be? That's my question. Tell me.
You know, why don't you call them off, Shaz, on your speed dial and find out?
Well, clearly you don't know. Unbelievable, huh? I mean, 1 + 1 = what in your math?
I'm not engaging with you, sir.
11D70 or what? All right. No need to engage. I did ask you what the motivation would be. But clearly you don't have any thoughts on that.
Google and find out yourself, because you're adamant in finding out. So
I'm looking at this pardon list. This pardon list is crazy. Haven't you ever seen the pardon?
Should I Google nonsense?
Oh my God, I ain't here talking how normal it's gonna be an argument.
What was the motivation?
Thank you. Somebody do
I have to pay you, Chris, for throwing him out the room? I don't mind. Just send me your bank details. I don't have cash out. I'm just sorry. I can't even. He just is so divisive. Every single thing. If a Jew is mentioned, even remotely, he has a bee in his fucking bonnet. I can't stand that.
Yeah, he crazy. They ain't gonna argue no matter what. But what's that? Todd Crisley and Julie Crisley. Y'all know who those people are? That husband and wife, they got arrested. They got pardoned. They got pardoned. The co-stars of Crisley Knows Best. That family that they went down for bank fraud.
Oh, I don't know.
They got pardoned. I know that is. Man, you know how many niggas this nigga pardoned every nigga who did bank fraud. Okay, if you did fraud, you got pardoned.
Maybe
It's the way. The Binance guy, he pardoned him. He pardoned some guy named James Womack. He was a distributor of methamphetamine. Oh, they say he was a congressman's son, Steve Womack. Who's Steve Womack? I don't know.
So we need that Adderall plug.
Ross Albright, the creator of the Silk Road, the former president of Honduras. And it said that the Binance guy was connected with child sex abuse. I didn't know that. There's no such thing as tax fraud anymore. What's about that?
I don't know, but that thing that you were playing, the guy who was talking, that was AI, wasn't it?
Oh, you mean that video when it was talking about the Lincoln that guy? It's just a video.
Okay. Yeah, no, the guy didn't talk. The guy didn't seem like he was real. Trump, I don't know. It didn't even sound like him, really.
Oh, well, Trump. It was Trump. They did show. Well, the guy that wasn't Trump who spoke. That was some other guy. Well, I guess the person doing the negotiations and shit.
You never, because there seems to be no place. He never fears the tiger, because there seems to be no place to see. Never fears the tiger.
And most of the people that heard this, they donated. The guy from Binance donated $2 billion. And some people did like 50 million. I cannot show that nigga. Get this money.
Only way you ever get where you want to go, you have to take a path that's dangerous, and most people want to take the safe path, and the safe path leaves you stuck in quiet desperation.